What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Nemo Propaganda here, and today we're going to review the ATC SCM 19. So those of you that have been following my work for a while, you guys know I reviewed the little brother ATC SCM 11 about a year ago, a speaker I loved so much I went on to give it a Product of the Year award, and I even bought a pair for myself, and I still own and still listen to them all the time. So in this review, well, first let me get those main specs on screen so you guys can check that out. I'll tell you about this speaker's unique and standout features. I'll tell you what it sounds like. Of course, I'll compare it to the ATC SCM 11. Of course, I'll compare it to the Bucard E50. And I don't want to compare it to the Arundel 1528, but I know somebody's going to ask, so I'll go ahead and do that too at some point. We will talk about amplifier pairing, room setup, all kinds of stuff. Then, of course, we will wrap up the video. So, standout or unique features. 1-inch tweeter, 7-inch mid-bass or bass woofer, binding post out back. Speaker is made in England and the speaker is sealed. We don't see too many sealed speakers. Generally these days, most are either front or rear vented, so I thought that was unique. So, look, you guys want to know what it sounds like? Let's jump into that. So, starting on the high frequency region, it's ever so slightly on the forward side of neutral. You're going to get a little bit of extra air, a little bit of extra sparkle. It is by no means bright or aggressive sounding. This is more about resolution. This speaker is going to give you a good amount of resolution and refinement at the same time. The attack of that treble region isn't going to be sharp, nor is it going to be soft. It's going to be pretty neutral in terms of its treble attack. Moving down to the mid-range, this is where the magic really happens with this speaker specifically. It tends to put a magnifying glass on the mid-range region, giving you a lot more resolution than I'm used to. There's a little bit of a rise in the mid-range region. There's some presence there. It is trying to show you into the recording of the music, right? So if you listen to some like singer-songwriter, for example, and you want to be able to, hear if that singer, grips the microphone a certain way or how their mouth is moving, and that's all happening in the mid-range, the SCM 19 is going to show you that. Now, with so much resolution in the mid-range does come some responsibility. You're not going to feed the speaker terrible quality recordings, but at the same time, you don't have to give it the creme de la creme of recordings. If your recording quality is good or better, the speaker should sound fantastic. Moving down to the bass, this is a sealed speaker, so despite its size and its heft, and this speaker does have a lot of heft to it, guys, look, if you haven't seen what an ATC woofer looks like outside of the cabinet, go ahead and Google it. You're going to be absolutely shocked about how beefy these things are. The motor structure on the back of this woofer is insane. Back to the bass region and what it sounds like. Being a sealed speaker, you're not going to have a ton of bass quantity. It's going to be even on the lighter side in terms of its total bass power. But the bass you do get is going to extend respectably low. It's going to be quick. It's going to be tight. It's going to be articulate. And if you have a room that requires you to put your speakers further back against the main wall, the ATC SCM 19 might want to be a speaker you consider, because I get this question in the comments section all the time. I'll review a speaker and the speaker's got really good, powerful, respectable bass, something like the Bucard E50, Spendor Classic 3.1, Kef R3 Meta, so on and so forth, right? Anything by Dyne Audio. And you guys will ask, hey, I can only have my speaker about a foot off the main wall. Will I be okay? And most of the time I say, probably not, right? When a speaker has a ton of bass, you want to give it some space off the main wall, but I know not everyone can accommodate that. So the SCM 19 may be a great option for a lot of you guys that need to get closer to that wall. So let's talk about amplifiers and what I did, because that does matter. This speaker is not crazy picky with amplifiers, but you do want your amp to have some power, because this is not the most sensitive speaker in the world, coming in at about 85 dB. First, I used my Kinky Studio preamp and mono blocks, and honestly, I didn't love that combination. I felt like I had way too much mid-range resolution, more than I wanted. I felt myself having to skip certain recordings, and I just didn't like that. It did sound fantastic. It definitely sounded very high-end, but I felt like I was just getting too much mid-range resolution, and that makes sense because my reference preamp and mono blocks do bring a lot of clarity. They are on the analytical side. I was also using the LAiV Harmony DAC at the time, which also gives a lot of mid-range expansiveness, detail, and clarity. And the ATC SCM 19 also has a lot of great mid-range expansiveness and clarity. So I was tripling down. What I think's going on here is simple as this. The ATC SCM 19 brings enough refinement, clarity, air, space, separation, detail, and resolution in the mid-range that you don't need to pair it with equipment that's going to bring more unless that's what you want. So what I did is I pulled out the CHoco EMEI. That was a little bit of a better pairing. I also pulled out my Hagel H190. That was a little bit of a better pairing as well. And I even downgraded my DAC to a more inexpensive model like my old Aries 2. And my Aries 2 with the Hagel H190 and the ATC SCM19 was absolutely fantastic. Despite all the resolution this speaker brings to the table from the mid-range on up, I didn't have to skip a single track when I was using that combination. But look, just because that's the combination I liked, doesn't mean one of you guys might not enjoy with the kinky setup with the more resolution, right? Resolution is like salt on food. How much is enough is going to be different to everyone. Some people like just a little bit. Some people like a lot, right? So there's no right or wrong here. Let's talk about, we talked about room placement, a little bit further back against the wall is probably better. We talked about amplification. I think it's time for comparisons. So let's do it. Let's compare it to the ATC SCM11 first, a speaker I loved so much. After the review, I bought it. Now, let me get one thing out of the way. The ATC SCM11 and the 19 do have quite the price gap. The 11 is $2,500, the 19 is $3,750. But I'm going to go ahead and say this is a case of different, not necessarily better. Yes, the ATC SCM19 has a larger sense of scale, being a larger speaker. Yes, it has more resolution in the mid-range. Yes, it has more resolution in the treble region. But I still really love the ATC SCM11. And if I could only have one, I think personally, I think I might pick the 11. I just like its tonal balance a little bit better, even though the 19 is the better speaker. But look, let me take you through it. Because look, your opinion might be different. I'm just talking about personal taste here, right? Remember, one is not better than the other. The SCM19's treble is going to be a little bit on the forward side of neutral. The 11's treble is going to be mostly neutral. The 19 is going to give you more air, space, and expansiveness and sparkle. Moving down to the mid-range, the two start to depart just a little bit. The SCM11's mid-range is mostly neutral. It's going to give great separation, fantastic imaging, but tonally it is neutral. There's no rise in the mid-range at all. Going over to the SCM19, there's a slight rise in the mid-range, a little bit more resolution in that mid-range region, even more separation, even more space, and an even larger sense of scale. Yes, the larger SCM19 is going to stage wider, taller, and deeper. That's no surprise. Moving down to the bass region, both speakers have very tight, very accurate bass, great note-to-note distinction. Both have respectable extension as well. Of course, the larger SCM19 is going to extend lower. However, neither of these speakers are bass monsters. They're both going to be fairly light on bass when you look at their respective physical sizes, right? So, one thing to mention perhaps about sealed speakers that some of you guys might not know, they are really easy to pair with subwoofers. I used a Rel T7X during half of my listening time when I was listening to the SCM19. The other half of the time, I didn't use a subwoofer, right? So, that's that comparison out of the way. Let's talk about this versus the Bucard E50. A ton of you guys asked me about that when I reviewed the E50, but I told you guys, I hadn't put a ton of hours on the 19 at that time, and I would compare the E50 more in detail when I reviewed the 19. So here we go. So both of these speakers are going to be a little bit low on their sensitivity. Both of these speakers are going to require a good amount of power. You don't need the most expensive amplifier in the world, but it's got to have, I'd say, at least an honest to God 50 watts wideband or more. Both speakers are going to sound great. When you turn them up, both speakers can play tremendously loud, and both speakers sound respectable at low volumes also, but tonally there are some major differences. Starting with the high frequencies, both speakers are a little bit on the forward side of neutral. Both speakers have really fantastic air, space, and separation and image really well. I couldn't really pick a winner in terms of the treble region for either of these speakers. They're both absolutely fantastic and fairly similar. Moving down to the mid-range, this is where they start to part ways in a major way. The Bucard E50 is a speaker with a lot of juiced up bass, and it's going to make that mid-range have a ton of body, heft, and weight to it. The ATC SCM19 is almost the polar opposite. Its bass is very light, so its mid-range is very airy, very open, very light. There's a little bit of a rise in the mid-range region. There's a little bit more resolution in that mid-range region, where the E50 has more body, more warmth, right? The SCM19 is not warm at all. The Bucard E50 is. Moving down in the bass region, again, they just keep parting ways even more. The Bucard E50, listen, Bucard Audio didn't make that speaker to have accurate bass. They wanted it to have extra bass, juiced up bass, and that's what it brings to the table. That speaker has a ton of bass. The SCM19 is going to be more neutral to slightly light on bass by direct comparison. As far as one being better than the other, they are so different. Look, this is going to come down to personal taste. Both speakers are very capable and have a fantastic sound in their own right. It is just different. Let's talk about the ATC SCM19 versus the Spendor Classic 3.1. That's another speaker in and around the same price. By the way, if I didn't say, the Bucard E50 is $4,000. The ATC SCM19 is $3,750. The Spendor Classic 3.1 is a little bit more expensive, coming in at $4,500, so about a $750 price difference. Physically, they're about the same size in terms of their overall volume or dimensions, if you will. The Spendor Classic 3.1 is a little bit more sensitive, but it's not a high sensitivity speaker. Both speakers need good quality amplification with a good amount of power. Let me tell you what they sound like. These two speakers, polar opposites entirely. I can't imagine the same person cross-shopping them, but here we go. The Spendor Classic 3.1 in the high frequencies is going to be a little bit warmer and rolled off compared to the SCM19. That is going to be a little bit more forward, energetic, with more airspace and separation. Moving down to the mid-range, the ATC SCM19 has a little bit of extra prominence in that mid-range region, a little bit more resolution, whereas the Spendor Classic 3.1 is going to have more weight, more body, be tremendously warmer, quite a bit tonally richer. Again, look, the Spendor Classic 3.1, this is all about warmth and, you know, just like tonal textures and things like that. Whereas the ATC SCM19 is going to be more expansive, more resolute in that mid-range region. Moving down to the bass, the Spendor Classic 3.1 is an absolute bass monster like the Bucard E50. There's just no comparison here. The speakers have totally different bass deliveries. The bass of the Classic 3.1 is more tuneful. It's got a little bit of bloom to it. There's a ton of it. You are never going to put that speaker all the way against a wall at all. Whereas the SCM19 is going to be a little bit tighter and quite a bit lighter overall with its bass power. Lastly, let's talk about the comparison I don't want to do because I think it's silly, the Arundel 1528. I know you guys are going to ask, so let's just get that out of the way. Look, the Arundel 1528, also $4,500 a pair, so $750 price difference. What do the two speakers have in common? Look, both the ATC SCM19 and Arundel 1528 are light on sensitivity, or low on sensitivity, I should say. Both need quality amplification that's going to bring the current, bring those watts. But look, I got to point out something here, because I don't think you guys realize how big the Arundel 1528 is. It's a big bookshelf speaker. It weighs 66 pounds each. It's got an 8-inch driver. It is arguably half a tower and not really a bookshelf speaker. But I digress. You guys asked for these comparisons even when they don't make sense, so I'm going to do it anyway. Starting in the high frequency region, both speakers are a little bit on the forward side of neutral. Both speakers bring a little bit of extra air, sparkle, resolution, and refinement. Both speakers have a fantastic treble region. Moving down to the mid-range is where they start to part ways. The Arundel 1528 tonally is going to be very neutral. The ATC SCM19 tonally is also neutral, but with a slight rise in that mid-range region. Both are all about air, space, separation, and expansiveness in that mid-range region. They just do it in different ways. Again, with the Arundel 1528 not having a rise, whereas the SCM19 gives you a little bit of a magnifying glass on that mid-range region. Moving down to the bass, look, I already told you that Arundel 1528 66-pound speaker. It's got an 8-inch driver. It's going to bring more bass to the table than just about anything. The Arundel 1528 has more bass than some floor-standing speakers, whereas the ATC SCM19 bass, it's more about being tight, accurate, very well controlled. It's a speaker you can get further against the main wall, where that Arundel 1528 is definitely going to want to be about, you know, maybe roughly around 3 feet front baffle to main wall in most rooms. So that's that comparison out of the way. Let me think if I've left anything out here. I told you about the standout features. I told you what it sounded like. I compared it to its little brother, the SCM11, and a bunch of other speakers. I told you about amplifier pairing. My preferred pairing was the Hagel H190. What else? I told you about, you know, room placement. Guys, I think that's the video. I think I've told you everything I wanted to tell you about the ATC SCM19. I'll leave you with this. because I was thinking, man, you know, this finish looks beautiful, right? This cherry. And this is like, it's more of like a matte, right? There's no gloss to it. I'm a guy that likes shiny, right? And I got to thinking some of you guys might wish it was shiny too. So I just wanted to share this tidbit with you. If I owned these, I'd hit them with a coat of beeswax. And for those of you that don't know, it's just a compound you can rub on any wood. It darkens it up, gives some vibrance and shine to it. That's what I would do if I owned these. I wish I could show you an example, but these are a review sample that have to be sent back, so I didn't want to modify them. But for my fellow fans of gloss finishes, I just wanted to share that with you. You can make this thing shine if you want to, but those of you that appreciate the matte finish, this wood veneer looks incredible in person. So look, that's the video, guys. If you got any questions, this YouTube channel does have a free Discord server. You could also ask your questions in the YouTube comments section below. Until next time, take care.